all give a big round of applause to Jesse Gilas, Solutions Engineer, Pax8. Good morning.
Thank you. Magandang maga, everyone. So, as I just mentioned, my name's Jesse. I'm part of the solution engineering team here at Pax8, and that means that every day I work with businesses just like yourselves to help evaluate cybersecurity solutions and help you pick ones that would be relevant towards your businesses. We'll also help you onboard those and bring those into your stacks so that you're comfortable using them. Now, as mentioned, my background is in cybersecurity and it's also within sales. So what I want to talk to you about today is how you can apply a risk-based approach to building out a successful cybersecurity practice and some sales techniques that you can actually use when going to market. Because this is what I often see as the two major issues for businesses like yourselves when you're coming to building a cybersecurity practice. Now, I do only have 45 minutes here with you today, so I just want to manage some expectations. I can't give you everything that you're going to need. But what I hope I can do is encourage you to take that first step on this journey and get started for yourselves. Now, what I often see people trying to do is look for a set and forget approach to building out a cybersecurity solution. Now, the problem is cybersecurity isn't something we do once. It's not a destination, it's actually a journey. And the reason for this is because attackers are always on the front foot. They're constantly innovating, coming up with better, newer, faster ways to get around our protections. And that means that I can't come home and say that what I did today was good enough, because tomorrow it won't be. So what does tomorrow look like? Unfortunately, that threat landscape is constantly changing. It's evolving. We can't predict what kind of attacks we're going to see next. And so what this means is that we can't actually guarantee security anymore. If attackers are always on that front foot, eventually they're going to get in. But this shouldn't be a new concept to us. If we look at something like our health, I can never guarantee that I won't get sick. But what I can do is I can take little steps every day to reduce the risk of that happening. I can do things like eat healthily. I can stop smoking, exercise regularly, all things that I can do to reduce that risk of being sick and improve my chances of staying fit and healthy. And this is the exact same approach that we need to be taking when it comes to cybersecurity. Because cybersecurity isn't completely technical. I actually say it's really an organizational risk management control. So we need to be moving away from this mindset around guaranteeing security, guaranteeing protection, and instead moving into this approach of reducing risk. Now, those risks are constantly changing. The threat landscape is evolving. As I said before, we can't set and forget our cybersecurity solutions. So we need to be constantly evaluating what those risks are. You know, this is that journey. It's something that we're never going to be stopping doing. And so what you'll end up doing is falling into this cycle of risk where you're constantly assessing where you are and how you can improve. So how can we get started with reducing risk? What I've got behind me are 3 questions that you can all use. So where are we now? Where do we want to be? And how can we get there? Now, these 3 questions, they're not specific to cybersecurity. You could use these in a lot of different scenarios, right? Like how we got here today, for example. Now, yesterday was my first day in the Philippines. We went for a bit of a wander. I got my first Jollibees, which was great. Got completely lost in the mall. There's so many of them here. So today, I took a bit of a different approach when trying to find this place. I took out my phone and I used Google Maps. I put into there the address and I pressed go. What did my phone do? It showed me where I currently was with that little blue GPS icon. It showed me where I wanted to be, and then mapped out that path towards how I could get there. Well, that's great, Jesse, but we're talking about cybersecurity, we're not talking about maps. Good point. But when we're looking at cybersecurity, frameworks are your map. So they can help you understand where you currently are, where you want to be, and what controls and safeguards you can actually implement to help you get there. Now, not only are they going to help you answer those 3 questions, they're also very useful from a defensibility perspective. If we're accepting that one day people are going to get in, then highly likely you're going to need to defend your actions to what you did from a defense perspective. By following something like a framework, it allows you to stand up and say, we weren't doing random things. We weren't installing random solutions. I wasn't randomly walking around the mall. We followed a set of guidelines that are globally accepted best practices towards how we can secure these environments and reduce our risk. Now, when you're choosing a framework, there are a lot of different ones you can choose from. The big ones, ISO, NIST. I saw here you've got the National Cybersecurity Plan. Choose a framework that makes the most sense for you, and make sure you're taking into account both your internal and your external stakeholders. So your staff, your board, your executive leadership, but also your clients. What do they all want to see from your cybersecurity strategy? Now, Lee mentioned earlier CIS. I want to introduce you to CIS because I'm a big fan of it. And if you're looking for somewhere to start along framework alignment, this is a really good one to choose. Now, the reason for this is it's a lot simpler than things like ISO and NIST. And it provides prioritizations, which means you can take this one step at a time. CIS also has mappings towards other frameworks. So things like ISO and NIST, what you'll find is if you're ticking boxes within CIS, you'll also be ticking boxes in those at the same time. Now, as an added bonus to that, at Pax8, we saw a little bit about our Opportunity Explorer before. We've got a few features within our platform that help you align to this, show you solutions that may cover your gaps, and help you understand where you currently are in terms of alignment. Now, for those of you who haven't seen CIS before, this is a very brief breakdown of what it is. So you'll see there's 18 controls listed here. Each of those controls focusing on a different area of cybersecurity. They're now split down into 3 implementation groups, or also known as maturity levels. So you'll see those in the yellow, the teal, and the green. And that allows you to prioritize what makes the most sense for you. And it's a lot easier to digest. Finally, it's also a comprehensive framework. So those 18 controls and 3 implementation groups make up a total of 153 safeguards, and you can work through those one step at a time. So you could start at control 1, which is about inventory of your assets, then move into control 2, which is inventory of your software, and work through it that way all the way through to 18. Now, when you do this, there are those maturity levels. And what these allow you to do is grow with your framework as you go on that journey. So what you'll see here is IG level 1 is really the baseline. It's your basic level. And you'll see there's 2 controls that we can implement for something like email and browser security. The first control here that we could do is something like making sure we're only using supported browsers and email clients. We then might also put on DNS filtering services. Then as we grow and we decide to upgrade our maturity, we'll look at IG level 2. And here we could do things like implement DMARC, blocking out unnecessary file types. And once we're at that level, our third step might then be growing to that final maturity level, IG level 3, which would be anti-malware protections. Now, what I want you to take away from this is you don't need to do all of this at once. I know it's a lot, but you can take this in little bite-sized pieces. That's all about that journey, right? And when you're doing this, use those questions we looked at before. So where are we now? Maybe right now we're at IG level 1. Where do we want to be? We want to be at level 2. How can we get there? We saw those safeguards that we can implement along the way. Now, when we're there, we don't stop there. Now, where are we? Now, where do we want to be? Now, how are we going to get there? So making sure that this is that constant cycle of maturity. So what we've done so far, we've accepted you can't guarantee security. So we've moved to a methodology that's centered around reducing risk. And we've used that constant cycle and tied it into a framework. And this is where we can see the results of that. Now, what I've got behind me is a CIS community defense model, and it shows the results of actually implementing some of these controls. Now, if we have a look at this, we'll notice that for something like malware, if we implement all of those first-level maturity controls, we can actually defend against 77% of some of those attack techniques. Now, if we continue on that journey, we grow with our maturity, we continue reducing that risk, we'll notice that we can get up towards 94% of defense against those attack techniques. Now, we talked earlier how you can't guarantee security. You can't get to 100%. But following a framework like this lets you get pretty close. Now, I know that was a lot, especially if you haven't already started, but we are here to help. You guys are not alone, so there are resources available to you through Pax8. Features like our Opportunity Explorer, our security program, where we can actually help you understand how you can do that and do some training with you. We've got CIS consultations, where we can find alignment and close those gaps with you. We are here to be with you on that journey. And when you do this, don't try and do it all at once. Don't get stuck trying to have everything. It's okay to start with one thing and grow. The best day for all of you to do this was yesterday. The second best is today. So don't put it off any further. Now, when you do start implementing some of these controls, the best way for you to go about this is by building it into a plan. And when you do this, prioritization is key. So decide what makes the most sense for you and for your businesses, which ones that you should actually focus on, and decide when you're going to do those. Now, what I've got up here is an example of our Pax8 Academy. This is something that we go through in one of our courses. So an example of what that 3-year roadmap may look like. You'll notice it's split down into each separate line. And if we take a look at one of them, something like awareness and training, we'll start by doing online videos and quizzes. Then, after 6 months, we'll then look at implementing something like a phishing campaign, where we're exposing our users to real emails and understanding, where their gaps are, what are they failing, what are they doing well with, taking those results and then implementing an in-person training session. Now, if I did all of that all at once, not only would I get overwhelmed, but my clients would too. The businesses we look after, they don't come to work to do cybersecurity. They come to work to do their jobs. So we need to make sure that we can break this down into manageable pieces. Now, if we take a little bit of a closer look at what one of those journeys may look like, I've got up here an example of something like an email security journey. Now, before I go through this is just an example. Not every business is going to be the same. This may not make sense for some of your businesses. It's important for you to prioritize this for yourself. Now, what I did is I first identified 3 risks that I want to prioritize in terms of treatment. So the biggest risk that I identified to me is phishing emails. Users clicking on malicious links, downloading malware, or falling prey to social engineering attacks. This is something that we see every single day. Anytime that we have that open communication channel to my end users, then we're opening ourselves up directly to these kind of threats. The next priority for me was attacks coming from my domain. So things like email spoofing, where people may be pretending to be me, sending out billing requests and having people pay that, damaging my reputation, but also accounts within my environment that have been compromised and are sending out malicious links or malware towards other organizations. The third one is making sure that people aren't sitting in the middle of that communication channel, breaching our confidentiality and our integrity. So I chose those 3 risks, and now we've got to look at how we're going to treat them. So in blue, you'll see the controls that we can implement to stop some of that. Now, the first one we're focusing on is that phishing. What we can do is implement something like a filtering solution, so a secure email gateway, an API-based filtering solution, so that we're scanning email as it's coming into our environment, looking for known threats, looking for known malicious links, and understanding when there's social engineering being used. Once we do that, we can stop it before it ever lands in front of our users. The second step there is, as we increase our maturity, we might look at blocking out unnecessary file types. So this is something that we saw in CIS. So if I never need macros in my environment, why should they ever come in? So being able to block those before they can come allows you to stop a lot of threats before they ever land. The third step there would be something like anti-malware protections. So going a step further than what we know are threats, and being able to have something like attachment sandboxing, so that we can detonate those in a safe place and start detecting zero-day attacks as well. Now, once I've implemented those three controls, then we get ourselves to a nice solid baseline in terms of preventing social engineering and phishing. So we'll pivot. First thing we're looking at is SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Now, I would love to see a raise of hands. Who has actually got really solid SPF, DKIM, and DMARC hygiene here? Okay, so not many. For those of you who haven't, I would recommend that you definitely go and take a look at making sure that your SPF, DKIM, and DMARC hygiene is up to scratch, because we don't want to have people pretending to be us and sending emails on our behalf. So make sure we lock that down. Now, the next step there was implementing something like business email compromise protection. I want to be able to know if people are in my environment and sending out malware from my own domain. So we can take a step further and start scanning our outbound emails and looking for evidence of that as well. Once I've done those two, I'm happy with where we've got in terms of attacks from my domain. So I'm going to pivot and I'm going to look back at social engineering and phishing and see how we can go a step further there. You might implement something like URL rewriting. Now, what this is going to do is any links that have been sent, it's going to rewrite it and it's going to point it somewhere where we can scan it. When we do that, it means that we can protect at time of click, not just at time of scan. So attackers, they're pretty smart, right? What they'll sometimes do is they'll send you a link, it's pointing to a clean website when it gets scanned. Now, after that lands in the inbox, they'll go and they'll change that website, they'll point it somewhere malicious. So when that link came through, it was fine, we allowed it, but now when the user clicks on it, they're going somewhere malicious. So being able to rewrite those URLs so we're protecting it every time it's clicked, very important. The last thing we wanted to treat were man-in-the-middle attacks. So the way we can do this, implement something like email encryption. If we're sending out sensitive data, make sure we're encrypting it. That way it can't be read, can't breach our confidentiality or our integrity. So that's an example of the kind of steps that you can take towards taking this risk-based approach and the controls that we can implement there. Now, what I want to point out to you is there's no finish line. Cybersecurity is a destination. It's not something that we're done with. Later on down the track, there may be a new risk that we need to treat. I might bring in something like DLP as we go down the track. And that's what I want you guys to take away from this. It's something we're constantly doing. Now, what I've got here is a video that I want to show you all. It's a old 1959 Chevy Bel Air. If anyone here is familiar with cars, like a really old, bulky Chevy. And they're doing a safety test on it. They're going to crash it into a 2009 Chevy Malibu. Now that modern car, it's a lot smaller, but it does have the new engineering. So raise your hands, who thinks the bigger car is going to come off better? No one. Everyone thinks it'll be the small one. Good guess. So if we take a look at this, what we'll see is the bigger car gets absolutely demolished by that smaller one. The reason is it's not about the size. Our engineering has come a long way in the last 50 years. Our safety ratings have as well. We've introduced things like crumple zones. We've lowered engine mounts. And what we'll see is over a 100-year period, our deaths on our roads have actually come down a long way. So things like seatbelts and airbags, lane control, drink driving rules, changes in our road regulations, licensing requirements, all these little things that we do along the way that are lowering that death rate. But where has it never got to? Zero. As a society, we've come to terms that that is our acceptable level of risk. We can't prevent all deaths, but what we are going to do is take reasonable steps with trade-offs, because we still want to get places quickly, but to get it as low as possible. Same sort of approach that we were talking about around reducing risk and not being able to get to 100%. Now, I can get in a car that has some of those more fancy controls. It can have things like lane control, blind spot warnings, driver assist, but they're still going to have seatbelts and airbags. Safety layers. I can never get in a car that doesn't, at the minimum, have a seatbelt and an airbag. So what are our seatbelts and airbags when it comes to cybersecurity? I talked earlier around the importance of a framework and aligning to it, but the reality is the amount of time that it may take us to come in and start following that framework and work through that process, it may take a month, it may take 2. And in that time, we could get hacked. So what we need to have is a solid baseline that we can implement straight away. 5 steps that you can take right now. MFA, this is a big one. Love to see a show of hands as well. Who's actually implemented MFA across all of your clients? Nice work, those of you who have. I think the statistics are around about 30% of us. As we've moved to the cloud, a lot of our infrastructure has started to become publicly accessible, which means we've seen a massive growth in identity-based attacks. I was looking at some statistics the other week, about 315,000 compromised credentials here in the first 6 months of the year in the Philippines. So really important to be making sure that we're authenticating that people are who they actually say they are. Now, this is a really easy step for you guys to implement to reduce your risk straight away. Microsoft had an article out a couple of years back. They said about 99% of attacks could have been stopped just by implementing MFA. So a very easy step that all of you should take today. The second one is advanced threat protection in your email security. We've already touched on the importance of email security, the risk that it poses to all of our organizations. Anytime that someone can send malware and links directly to our users, we're going to have problems. So being able to stop that malware, stop those links, and stop those social engineering attacks before they have the chance to land, very important. The third thing is endpoint detection and response. Now, this is called out in CIS Control 10. And the things that you want to keep in mind here is you want to apply it to all your endpoints. There's no point putting it on 2 or 3 computers or a small portion. We need to protect everything. And when you're doing this, we need to move away from a legacy-based protection model. So any time that we're looking to just scan known signatures, it's not going to be enough. If we're accepting that threats are getting smarter and they're getting around us, we need to be recognizing malicious behavior, recognizing when those processes on our computer shouldn't be, and stopping them in their tracks in real time. So a few things to watch out for there when you're doing EDR. The fourth one here is very close to my heart, security awareness training. And I think it's probably a little bit of a pride thing because we're always called the weakest link as people. We're always the weakest link in cybersecurity, but we don't have to be. If we get given the right skills, the right training, we can actually be one of the strongest links. So what I want you all to do when you're implementing something like security awareness training is to actually try and build a culture of commitment over compliance. So as someone who's receiving an email, I need to know that it's okay to question my boss if he's asking me to pay $10,000 to this random account. Because if not, if I'm too scared to ask him and I think he's going to get angry, then I'm just going to do it, and that helps out what attackers are looking for, that sense of urgency that they want. So when you're implementing security awareness training, make sure you build that culture of questioning and that commitment over compliance. Help users understand the why behind what they're doing. And the last one, backup. I think this is very self-explanatory. If they're eventually going to get in, we need to have something there for that worst case scenario, because it's not going to be a matter of if, it will be a matter of when. And I can tell you, speaking from experience, having a backup is an absolute lifesaver when everything's gone wrong and you need to restore. I think a really good one to point out here as well, if you're trying to talk to your clients about this, is Microsoft Clause 6B. So they actually say, well, they recommend that you use third-party services and backup tools to regularly back up your data. So by bringing those 5 key features into your stack today, you can straight away get yourself to a really nice solid baseline to start that journey. Now, what I've talked about so far is that risk-based approach. This is one half to what we need to do, and it's the easier part. The other side is actually getting your clients to say, yes, I want that and I need it. So what I want to show you is something called red ocean and blue ocean based sales. Now, a red ocean based sale is what we're all used to doing. It's where there's blood in the water from the competition. Pricing and expectations are known. So if I try and sell someone an iPhone, they know what the price of it is, they know what it does, they know where else they can go buy it. And this is what we're used to selling as technology providers. We're used to selling laptops. We're used to selling hours of support services. And this is how we often try and sell cybersecurity. But the problem is, people don't know what SEAM is. They don't know what EDR is, XDR. You're talking a whole other language to them. So we need to change our approach, and we actually need to use what we call a blue ocean sales strategy. And this is where pricing and expectations are not known. This is what you want to use when you're looking at emerging markets. Now, to do this, we use a 3-step process. It's called teach, tailor, take control. And this was something that was introduced to me by David Powell, who's our VP of Sales Strategy in the US. If any of you ever get the opportunity to watch any of his stuff, I would definitely recommend you do. But the first part of this is around teaching. Cybersecurity is all about education. They don't understand how it works or why they need it, so we need to teach them first. Now, what I've got on the board are 5 common objections that I come across every day. So, things like, it's too expensive, or it's not going to happen to us. My personal favourite, we're too small. I'm sure each and every one of you has come across one of these objections recently. The problem is, these objections come from a place of ignorance, which means they're actually misconceptions. So the way we need to overcome them is through education. 2 images up behind me. On the left is the gated community. This is the kind of place where I would love to live. I'm sure we all would. You've got beautiful parks, nice safe neighbourhood. I could walk the streets at night and I wouldn't be worried. I probably wouldn't even bother locking my door. And if one of my neighbours got broken into, I'd be very surprised. And this is where a lot of our businesses think that they live. They think that from a cybersecurity perspective, they're safe, they're not being targeted, they're in this gated community. But the reality is, they're not. They're on that right-hand picture. They're in that unsafe part of town where crime is everywhere, where I wouldn't be walking the streets at night, and I would definitely be locking my door before I leave the house. So this is a misperception that a lot of them have. And it comes down to a lot of different factors. The primary one being we don't talk about it. We never hear about smaller and medium-sized businesses being attacked. If we look at the news, it's always your big companies. It's your government. It's your healthcare, your big banks. I saw one recently here, the DMW got hit. These are the ones that are being publicised, and it's leading to that false perception. But if we actually look at the statistics, what we'll find is 90% of our ransomware and business email compromise incidents are actually affecting our smaller and medium-sized enterprise clients. And the risk of that, the consequence, 60% of small business goes out of business within 6 months of being hacked. So real life consequence, real life risk. And what I want you to try and do when you're trying to get this point across to your clients is use the bank in a small town analogy. If any of you haven't heard of it, ask them, would you rather rob the bank that's in the middle of town, the big one that has the full-time security guard and the impressive security features? Or do you go for that small one that's out in the middle of nowhere and they only have a part-time security guard? Yes, you're not going to get as much money, but it's a lot easier for you to do. And if you hit enough of those small banks, you'll make up the same amount that you would from that big one. And that's what we're seeing a lot of attackers doing, utilising something like AI, throwing this massive wide net out and hitting the low-hanging fruit that's our smaller and our medium-sized enterprise businesses. So when we're doing this, what we need to do is actually encourage them to discuss their problems. We want to share stories ourselves. I'm sure all of you have got cybersecurity incident stories that you can talk about, so go out and do it. Approach your clients, tell them about the problems that you're seeing. What I've got here is an example of such a story. So this is a medium-sized mortgage company that had about 30 employees. And what happened was they had their credentials harvested, sold online, someone bought them, and they logged into their email account. What they did is they sat in that email environment and they watched, they listened, they learned. And they waited for the perfect time when there was a deal that was close to being closed, and then they decided to take action. And what they did was they looked at the domain name that this mortgage company had been communicating with. They bought something that looked similar. So you see it all the time, replacing an I with an L, those kind of things. They sent an email to this mortgage company and they said something like, look, thanks for your help over the past month. It's been great working with you. Really looking forward to getting the keys to the property. We've made some changes internally towards how we're going to process this payment though. Can you actually send the new deposit into this account number in BSB? What happened? The mortgage company received that email, it looked fine, the cadence was good, the relationship was there, so they paid the money. $250,000 paid to the wrong account. Could your clients afford to lose $250,000? I know I couldn't, that's a lot of money. What I want you to take away from this, and the message that I want you to give to your businesses, is that this wasn't an overly complicated attack. This was normal people doing normal things, but it resulted in a loss of almost $250,000. So once we've taught them, we now need to tailor that to them. We need to make it relevant. Now, everybody drives differently. The person who's driving this bubble car, they're going to drive completely differently to the person who's driving that fast car on the right. They've got different acceptable levels of risk. The person in that bubble car, they're probably not going to be speeding. They're going to be stopping at your stop signs, as opposed to the other car, which is going to be swerving in and out of traffic, accepting the risk of a speeding fine. All of our businesses have different acceptable levels of risk, different levels of risk appetite. So what you need to do is ask them those two questions on the board. How much risk are they willing to accept, and how much are they willing to pay to mitigate that? So if we look at that mortgage company, the cost of a breach, $250,000. The cost of implementing something like email security for a business that size could be as low as $1,500. That cost of inaction may be more than they realised. But what you'll find is people will often choose inaction because they don't know the true value of what they have. And that's the same objection that we saw earlier. We don't have anything attackers want. So what you need to do is you need to make them realise the value of what they've got. Now, I'm a big reader. I've got a ton of books at home, probably 100 at least. Some of them I keep in my really nice bookshelf, the ones that I really like. But the rest of them, they're on a big pile on the floor. I don't really read them, I don't look after them, there's just not enough room. I recently inherited a set of books called the Naturalist Library, and it was really old, dusty, they were very worn, and I kind of wasn't all that interested in them. So I just put them on that pile that I didn't care about. Now, my mum came over, she had a look at them, and she said, "Oh, Jesse, these are really old books, they're actually worth a lot." It turns out this Naturalist Library was a couple of 100 years old. They're hand illustrated, where people have actually come in and they've drawn things like whales and all kinds of animals, places. And I didn't realise the value of them. So what she did was she educated me on what they were. And after that, I picked those books up, I took them out of that pile, I dusted them off, made sure their spines were aligned, and I put them in my nice, good bookshelf. I looked after them. So we will add different layers of protection to things that are worth more to us. The books didn't change, but my perception of them did. So what you need to do is you need to help your clients understand the value of what they have. If their database got leaked and they had to notify all of their clients, do you think they'll be repeat customers next year? So maybe that database wasn't that old pile of books. Maybe it is that Naturalist Library that they should actually pick up off the floor and protect. So now we've taught them why cybersecurity is important. We've tailored that to them and helped them understand their risks. But the last step here is getting action. Now, I want you all to look to the person on your left and your right. They are not your competition. Your biggest competition here is inaction. People not taking what you're saying. To get action, what we want to do is we want to use hope. We don't want to make this seem hopeless. We don't want to use fear. So what I want you to do is take this visual, I want you to put your arm around them, not force them at gunpoint to go and do cybersecurity. We want to make them know that they're not alone, that it's a safe place, because nobody wants to do this. I know. But if we don't address this, you will be at risk. So I know that something like phishing emails and business email compromise is a real threat to your business. But what I'm seeing a lot of other businesses like yours doing is using email security to reduce that risk of compromise. What I did there was I made sure that they felt this was safe. I let them know they weren't alone. And then I used peer pressure to make sure that if they didn't do it, they're probably going to be left out. No one wants to be left out. But the challenge is, even then, no one wants to spend their money on cybersecurity. You are never going to find someone who says to you, Jesse, thank God you're here. I've been saving up money every month. I've got this big old pile now, and I really want to spend it on cybersecurity. It's just not going to happen, right? So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get them to readjust. We've all had experiences where we've had to pay to fix a home or a car or something that wasn't in our budget. Now, at our house, we had termite damage. The contractor came out, he looked at it, he said, look, you're going to have to knock down all your walls, your guttering needs replacing, you've got a leak in the roof, and your garage needs refurbishing. We had a look at that and we decided, is it worth it? Maybe we should just sell the house. But that builder reapproached us and he said, look, I know we've got all this stuff that needs to be worked on, but let's just focus on one thing at a time. Let's just get that leak done. We'll worry about the rest later. We'll treat it later. So what he did was he just said one thing that we needed to do and we prioritized it. Now, I don't know if any of you are really familiar with termites, but they love wet environments. If we had come and we'd done the termites first and we'd got rid of them and we'd replaced all of our walls, but we didn't fix the leak first, then we would have had another wet environment, termites would have come back in, and we would have been right back to square one. So do this one step at a time. Approach your clients, find the most actionable item, prioritize it, and then work from there. We looked at MFA earlier. This can be a really easy first step for you. Simple to implement, greatly reduce that risk of compromise on our accounts. So how do we get someone to take action? Show them something immediately actionable and take it one step at a time. So that's how you can approach selling into something like a blue ocean. I'd encourage all of you to go out and try that in terms of selling some of your cybersecurity solutions. But when you do so, one final mistake that I see a lot of businesses doing is pitching clients on products. You shouldn't have to go out and sell individual products. If I go and get my hair cut, the barber doesn't tell me which scissors he's going to use, which razor. He is the expert, he makes the decision. So are all of you in this room. So take those services, bundle them together, and sell that final outcome. Standardize a stack. Take that to market, build out a good, better, best approach, and use scalability to make sure that you don't run into issues down the line. Thank you, everyone. I hope that gives you a little bit of direction around how you can go and get started with building out your own cybersecurity practice and the approach that you can take when it comes to assessing and reducing risk and actually going to market on those services. Now, what I talked about today is only a small snippet of what you need to do, but I've included some next steps for you all. 2 QR codes. The first one there is our Pax8 security program. If you haven't, I would recommend that each and every one of you goes and signs up to that. It's completely free and they go into a lot more depth than what I went today. They will help you with alignment towards CIS and building out that baseline from your security practice. The second thing I've included is a link to our Pax8 Academy. Now, there's a lot of different training courses on there, so things like sales and marketing, operations, and it's with a lot people who are a lot smarter than I am, so I would recommend you have a look at that. And finally, for those of you who aren't partners already, sign up, utilize us, we're here to help. We've got solution engineers like myself and a few others who you saw earlier on stage today. We can sit down with you, find what solutions may be best suited, and help you build out that stack. So if you're looking for a partner to help you grow your business, reduce your risk, and streamline your efficiencies, then have a chat to us at Pax8. Thank you, everyone. If you've got any questions, I'll be around. Feel free to come say hi. Salamat.